Well, in today's gospel, we have two amazing encounters with Jesus, two people desperately in need of a rescue, as we prayed in our psalm. Jesus had been over in Decapolis on the sort of the non-Jewish side of the Sea of Galilee and had just returned back to Capernaum, his home base of operations. And there he's approached by Jairus, a synagogue official whose daughter obviously is gravely ill, even unto death. And as he's responding to that need, a woman with severe health problems takes her chance and dives into the crowd just for the chance to grab a hold of his cloak, thinking that if I just touch him, I will be healed. Now, if I were to ask you, what is the common factor between Jairus and this poor woman, what would you say? Well, the theological answer would be they both had faith. And if you could get one thing from this homily, it would be this: faith moves. Their faith was not blind, it was reasonable. They knew about Jesus, but their faith would not allow them to remain passive. Faith called them to take a chance. Jesus was near, and they had to take that first step, to take the chance to step out into the open. And that faith also exposed them to the possibility of disappointment and failure. It didn't change them into superheroes either. They were just the people that they were, making the faith response in the moment, the same way it is for you and for me. But I think that these two people shared in something else as well. And that other common factor was desperation. This was their last chance. This was their last hope. Time was running out. And the situation had become so dire that desperation motivated them to act. Can you tell me why it is so often in our own lives that we have to become desperate to finally do what we know all along ought to be done? Sometimes our lives have to literally fall apart before we are willing to move or willing to change. And our perspective is crushed and radically transformed. It's what we need in order to be motivated to do what has to be done. Now, on the north shore of Superior, there's a river, the Temperance River, that cuts a thin gorge on the way, the last little bit before it enters into the lake. And to fall into that gorge would be certain death. But there are places that if you mustered your courage, you could actually jump across it. Now, I know because I saw somebody do it. But I would say this, that if you were being chased by a bear, you would jump that gorge, and on the far side, you'd look back and hardly remember that crack you just crossed. Why? Because you were motivated by desperation. So with that in mind, maybe when we face these awful, crushing situations, the trials and moments of overwhelming desperation, perhaps we could find a seed of thankfulness within us, because now we have become motivated. That's weird and that's backward, right? To be grateful for such things, but like the children of Israel in the Old Testament, and these were a people that underwent a lot of pain and a lot of tribulations, but they had to do so because they were seduced into complacency by good times. Now, Father Walter Chiswick made this observation in his book, He Leadeth Me, as he was talking about the pain of the Polish people back in the October of 1939 when the Soviets came and took over their country. He wrote this: "That same lesson each of us must learn, difficult or not. How easy it is in times of ease for us to become dependent on our routines, on the established order of our day-to-day existence to carry us along. We begin to take things for granted, to rely on ourselves and our own resources to settle in this world and to look to it for support. So when our worlds come crashing in, whether it's a matter of health, whether it's a matter of a loss of a loved one, or the loss of an entire country, we are reminded of how helpless we really are. And in those moments, maybe we can have that wherewithal to recognize that this moment is that time. Maybe it's hard to be grateful for it, but we can at least realize that now is the moment that faith is calling me out of my complacency. Faith is giving me the opportunity, the chance to respond and to reach out for Jesus, because he is the only thing that will do anymore. Faith moves forward. And we shouldn't wait for disaster to exercise our faith. And if we're exercising our faith in little things now, we'll probably do better when the big challenges come and things get truly hard. Jesus is in our midst. We should all be moving forward and doing something right now. Serve in the body of Christ. Now, you don't have to do everything, but you should be doing something. And we should all be willing to risk a little failure just to get to the side of Christ, to touch him and to be healed. Because in giving of yourself, you will be healed. And like Jairus, in stepping towards Jesus, when a whole crowd is following you and now you're out in the open, that act of faith might bring what might be a withered faith in your heart, might bring it back to life, raised from the dead. I can't say what the outcome will be for you or for me. God rarely works in the way that I want him to, or I think that he should. And also we remember that when we step forward in faith, we don't operate with a contract with God. I think particularly with some of our devotions as Catholics, we need to remind ourselves of that. We are his loyal servants. God will do good in our lives. So by faith, I believe that he will reward you, that he will bring goodness into your life, and maybe even actually a life-changing miracle, like for Jairus and for this woman with the hemorrhage. Let us all remember, faith moves